So I'll open this up to any of the panelists.
Not here. They're
Not
still
here.
all teams.
Yeah, they love these virtuals. Is what I've seen. You really got to drag them out if you want to try and get them there, from what I see.
I've actually tried to bring them out, and they went to their manager and hid behind their manager saying, no, we don't have the budget for that. Despite the fact that on a national labor allocation, the auditor was within a 30-minute drive of the taxpayer.
Yeah, I mean now in theory they are allocating the claims out to different
National
offices where
workload.
whoever's got
Yeah.
availability as opposed to one that's close by or might actually understand what you're doing. Uh, David, do you have anything to add to that?
Um,
No, I'm in agreement with what you guys said.
Next question. Has anyone observed any trends in terms of quantity or intensity of reviews? Can you describe where you think the review experience is currently and where you'd like to see it?
I currently have 12 files in CRA, and all of them have Integris case numbers. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Yeah.
Sorry, what? Have which?
Integris, their internal, like their case number, like once it gets an Integris number, you know you're into, at a minimum, a desk review, but more than likely a coordinated review.
I've seen them go up. Um, and the we've just been really fortunate and we've had very few over the years, touch wood. But the ones that I'm seeing are, I feel like they're less organized. We've had reviewers show up having not read the materials that they insisted they needed at least 30 days in advance. We've had reviewers saying that you can't run tests outside because you can't control the weather. We've had other statements that, don't really align with, I think, best practices. So, I don't think that like the quantity is higher and the quality, I don't know if the quality is where it needs to be. I've had some of the really old school reviewers as well. I had one who I think has been at the CRA for 30 years and he decided he just did it the way he wanted to do it. And he was hands down the best reviewer we had. He was very difficult, but you knew exactly where you stood with him. And I miss those types of audits.
What's interesting is looking at some of the audits that I've seen where I've been brought in to assist on accounting firm issues as opposed to R&D issues. The auditors there, at least the experiences, they're much worse and less experienced and not as focused. They really don't know what they're asking for. So it's very interesting. So I think from a certain degree, we're fortunate in the R&D area, and maybe I'm even more fortunate that I haven't had too many R&D audits. And it's a nature of my clientele or the claims, I'm not sure, but I can't comment on whether they're more harsh or less harsh because so far no news is good news. Next question. Will CRA continue with their focus on a national approach to CRA audits, meaning the RTA and financial reviewer could be from different regions across Canada from each other and or taxpayer claimant? I think from my experience and my understanding is they're doing this purposely to be more efficient and therefore get your claims faster and do it better. I'm hoping they're also using it as an excuse to make sure they got better people for the claims so they're more relevant. I don't know if
Don't
anyone's
worry, they're not.
anyone have any experience or comments with respect to that?
National Workload Administration is the bane of my existence because very often I find that I'm 2 and 3 time zones different from the reviewer.
That's
I don't know
because
if
you're
you've also.
working in a very remote area.
Well, that might be the case too.
Maybe nobody wants to go up to you.
Oh, I know they don't.
Especially in the winter.
Yep.
Personally, I found that when they do the reviews, it's pretty comprehensive. They usually do the technical and the financial together. However, I found it's been pretty efficient using the My Account. So if you have the client has My Account services for the CRA website, you can usually upload all the information, the request for information, and supporting documents back and forth fairly efficiently. And I don't know, I found that when the review's done, the CRA reviewers have been pretty reasonable in most cases. So no complaints on that end. So again, I find the service is actually getting more efficient, I think, than it was 5 years ago.
So the question that I had following your presentation, Elizabeth, was entirely a mechanical one. When there are changes made that are substantive enough to warrant a new edition of the T661 form, like recalculation of expenditure limits retroactive to December 2024, well, I guess two-parter. One, do we know when the next version of the T661 is going to be released? And two, I actually have a publicly traded company with a March 31, 2025 year end that has filed that they will be candidates for refundability. Will CRA revisit those internally and then issue a refund? Or do we have to do differential calculations of the expenditure limit or the conditions across that time? Or do we have any of the answers to any of these questions
We
yet?
don't have any of those answers right now. It is, from what I can tell, we are just building the airplane as we're flying it, be it the tax software, be it the forms at the CRA, because one didn't even know if that budget was going to pass. And then there are still a number of steps that need to happen before, they figure out those details. But one thing I'm fairly confident will not change is the 18-month filing deadline. So whatever the CRA decides, if you only have 2 days to sort it out, you only will have 2 days to sort it out, because I can't see them extending that. But Earl and David have been around for a while in this space and survived a few of these changes. Maybe you have some additional insight here.
CRA is not going to be proactive. You have to protect your client, and with the deadline in mind, I would file revised forms based on the new rules.
Yeah, I'd manually calculate it if I had to.
And yeah, if forms don't work, then just force them. Basically is what I would recommend.
That's a very good point.
I would also watch for Department of Finance when they pass the draft legislation into law, and then we know it's in or out. Ultimately, I think the only real issue would be with respect to doing amendments if we're beyond the 18-month filing deadline that we alluded to, and so we have periods that apply to, but it's not really an issue right now for periods that this would apply to, the new credits, that is.
Yeah, it'll start to become an issue come June of 2026. I agree.
Okay, one other question is, how can a claim be pre-approved without any systematic investigation actually done, documentation done, or technological advancements gained? Hasn't that been the basis of the entire review process for decades, and not just the technological uncertainty, which would be known up front?
I mean, ask the National Research Council that. They grant money based on plans all the time. I think there's lots of evaluative mechanisms, but of course the caveat is that the approval comes with an understanding that the subsequent work has to be reflective of that which was covered in the PCC or the PCR, I guess.
PCA, I think, will be the abbreviation. But I mean, that brings up a really good point, because with the pre-claim consultations, the costs were starting to be incurred. You had more supporting evidence and so on. But with the pre-claim approval, you're right. If it differs substantially, is it still an approval?
I suspect there's not a chance. It's still an approval. But I mean, again, I mean, I guess the mechanisms for something like IRAP under the National Research Council, they have interim reports over the course of the year, right? So they have check-ins to find out if the guardrails associated with the approval are still in place. But it sounds to me, I love that, flying the airplane and building it at the same time. That seems to be what's happening here too.
My experience with the pre-claim approval process has been mostly positive. I've only done it in a couple of seen it in a couple of cases where clients kind of had financing or were really leery about financing a project unless they had a reasonable assertion they were going to get the credit. So they did the pre-approval, and what ultimately I think you need to do is ensure that what the ultimate research was consistent with what you submitted. And most of the problems that I've heard of people not, the CRA not adhering to the pre-approval is usually because what you said you were planning to do doesn't necessarily match up with what actually happened. And I think if you understand that fundamental, then everything kind of falls into place.
Next question. Don't you have the recent impression that CRA sometimes refuses a claim for budgetary reasons independently of the claim's quality? When it happens, they don't even listen to explanations. That's interesting.
I wouldn't suggest that, at least amongst my clients, nobody has a materiality of claim that would move the budgetary needle in any way. I don't think that's the issue. Although I will say that I think the greatest failings I've had in reviews have been essentially a differential or a schism between what I'm communicating and what the auditor is understanding. Now, I've actually had a pretty good run in the appeals process, independent of the actual audit process, and you know, maybe you take a look at something differently when you filed it 3 years ago, but that tends to be. I wouldn't suggest that there's any sort of shred budget, or I mean, who knows? Based on the tax earned by audit, maybe there is something in that respect, but likely not largely in the case. Richard Wong's question, do the
Yes,
new budget
I'm
rules
going to get to
apply?
that.
Yeah, only to fiscal years end or start after December 13th. Yeah, but my suspicion is that there's going to be some sort of breakover rule. There usually is, that you have so many days within the period. So like your $3 million expenditure limit, if you've got 30 days into the breakover period. I mean, maybe we don't
It's
know
December
that.
16th, not the 13th, too.
Yeah, that's right. My son's birthday. That's how I should remember that.
So the exact wording is effective for taxation years that begin on or after December 16th, 2024.
Ah,
So it will not impact that. Next question. Are particular industries that have been fined for gross negligence or involved in tax schemes that have been targeted by the CRA? So they're specific.
That wasn't in the breakdown of what was sent in the ATIPs, so it just gave the aggregate. It might be an interesting follow-up to see if maybe it's the food industry, because I know someone reached out to us about they'd been targeted with the GNP and they were in the food industry, but I haven't seen anything.
Unrelated to R&D per se, but you can see they've plowed a whole bunch of money into truckers, so they don't trust them for whatever reason. So I don't know that there's any serious claims in the trucking transportation business per se, but certainly CRA has seen that as an area for underreporting of income. We still have some time if there's any more questions. And again, you can submit ideas of what you'd like to see or hear in the questions, because that only comes to us. And we don't need to read those, but we'll then know. Okay, another question's popped up. What's the best way to handle those miscommunications during a review where the RTA is clearly not hearing or understanding what the claimant's describing? Does it have to go to appeals? And if so, any tips on how to succeed at that stage? No, it's very simple. If your reviewer is not doing that, you just got to go to the manager.
Yeah.
A lot of times you got to bring the manager in because, quite frankly, the RTA or the FR just does not understand some things that just haven't been around long enough, and they're not familiar with it. So it's reasonably often, but clearly no. Appeals is much later in the process. Anyone else want to make comments related to that?
Well, I just refer back to what I said about using the My Account. And if you can have all the documents uploaded under, they usually give you a case reference file, then it's easy to bring the manager in because they're going to have access to all that information in an organized manner. And the more documentation you can provide up front, the easier that's going to make the process. The less assumptions they have to make and the more definitive you can make it, I find the smoother that goes.
Related to this, I find that the manager doesn't always support the reviewer, especially if they're really wrong. And a lot of times they will pull them aside to discuss it, if not actually there later on. So you will see the manager does have a positive impact. They're not there. It's not like the police shows where you say if you're in blue or whatever, you got to protect the other people in blue, the blue wall. It's not like that. What I've found is that the managers, especially since, I mean, at least from my experience, most of the managers we know, so they know we're not just blowing smoke up that there is an issue with a reviewer for bringing it to the manager. The next question. Oh, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one strategy that I think not enough people are using is that you can submit a one-page summary to an auditor when they show up, and they will look at it and they will take it into account. And sometimes that's much more efficient than just passively answering the questions, right? Especially if you show up to defend a claim written by another consultant or by a non-consultant. Those are the worst. If you can summarize the essence of the claim in half a page and show that to the auditor as soon as they show up, that can save a lot of effort and a lot of misunderstanding. And I haven't seen that used a lot.
I actually, I go the opposite route. I actually use the long form. I drag out my old 2003 version project description framework, and I explain in more detail sort of working on okay, you've got 1,500 words of it. What if you have 2,500 words of it, where I can get into some of the more detailed iterations? I've also found that to be successful too.
Yeah, but usually when the audit starts, they're not really in the mood to read a long document. They're eager to get.
Oh no, that goes 30 days before. I get that to the auditor well in advance.
Oh, okay.
I've even had one who rescoped the audit after receiving long form. There were 4 projects that were under scope, and he decided that after reading the long form of all of the projects that he was only going to look at one of them, and that he accepted the others as filed. So it happens. It just, and in that case, I knew the auditor well enough to understand his approach to the projects, and yeah, that kind of comes with some experience too.
Sure, makes sense.
Next question. We have an appeal that has been outstanding for more than 2 years. It still hasn't been assigned to an auditor. Is this normal? Unfortunately, It's very normal, and I think it's only going to get worse, quite frankly, as more claims go in. I mean, you've seen some of the cases here. We're talking about 10, 15 years before they get to the courts, and then they get appealed even after that. So, and yes, I know you're just talking about appeals, not truly the courts per se, but even within CRA, it's a very long process. So is it normal? Yes. Are they trying to address it? In theory, yes. Will they? I don't know. Anyone else? Comments? Okay then.
Twiddling my thumbs on a couple, for sure.
Do you think that the success rate in objection is so low with a CRA acting simultaneously as both judge and party that any dispute should be escalated to the Tax Court of Canada after 3 months? I'm not sure it's fair to say that notice of objections are not successful if they're done well. I don't know. I mean, ideally, the best thing is to obviously get things resolved before you get to that stage. But I don't know if anyone wants to comment as to whether they're finding the success rate with a notice of objection is very low and therefore should go to Tax Court of Canada right away or not after 3 months.
I mean, maybe after 3 months, I might get a lawyer, go and talk to justice and say, can we settle this so that it doesn't go to court? I've done that too, and that's been successful.
It might also depend on the amount. If you're talking informal appeal amounts, under 25,000 credits, those tend to go a lot faster than a formal appeal. So
they're bumping up the informal now, Threshold is going up to 50K.
Certainly a small claims court, I don't know, but informal procedure, but maybe they're probably going lockstep, so it wouldn't surprise me. Well, let me take the opportunity to thank all presenters, Sean, Ben, Justin, Elizabeth, Ohad, and David, and also thank Elizabeth and David for significant work in making sure this happens every year. I'd like to thank all the people that are here, and 90% of you were very useful and involvement. But again, I'd like to see, we had one idea of something we could present on in the future, but haven't heard any feedback on some of the things I mentioned as to whether people would like to see some of those things. So hopefully my email or David's will be overwhelmed with suggestions of things that they want to see, because certainly people haven't dumped them into the questions and answers. On that note, David, do you want to say anything in closing?
No, thank you, Earl. That was great. And again, we'll hopefully keep this going at least once a year. And I think the feedback and response has been great so far. Thanks again.
Yes, please feel free to send any feedback. Be happy to see it. And we ended 9 minutes early.
Excellent. Hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Take care.